Energy media viewers have been asking me to respond to a February 14th op-ed in Maclean's magazine by former Imperial Oil executive Ross Belot, titled Why Canada's Oil Sands Aren't Coming Back, as well as a video by Mr. Global, the TikTok energy expert who has commented on Belot's piece. I'll link to those in the description. The crux of Belot's argument is that the Alberta oil sands can't compete with cheaper U.S. shale oil. The oil sands and shale oil, however, are apples and oranges. Sure, they're fruit, but not alike at all. And let me explain why. Bitumen from the oil sands is a hydrocarbon mixed with sand, clay, and other materials. It's like peanut butter and won't flow in a pipeline unless diluted with lighter hydrocarbons. It's considered an ultra-heavy sour crude. Refineries require special gear called cokers that cost billions of dollars to process this heavy crude. Shale oil is light sweet crude oil. Bakken crude from North Dakota, for example, is as close to gasoline from the ground as you can get. Light sweet doesn't require nearly as much processing as ultra heavy sour crude, which is why it fetches a higher price. Bitumen has a reputation for being expensive to extract. So let's dig a little deeper into that question. The oil sands are like a manufacturing operation. Bitumen requires special extraction and processing methods, along with a great deal of infrastructure. Those capital costs are paid at the beginning of a project. Capital plus operating costs are called full cycle costs, and they're high. But once the capital is paid back, the operating cash costs are quite low. Those are called half cycle costs. Most oil sands projects have now paid back their capital and are operating on a half-cycle basis. In this graph, the top line is the West Texas Intermediate oil price. The line below that is mined bitumen without an upgrader, which comes in around $40 per barrel. Next is SAGD, or steam-assisted gravity drainage, which is the fastest growing form of oil sands production, and it costs around $30 per barrel. Then there is mined synthetic crude oil, which is just above $20 per barrel. And remember, those are Canadian dollars, while the producers are paid in US dollars, which is valued significantly higher. The current spread is a big advantage for Canadian producers. The next graph shows break-even costs for US shale production. Costs run from $61 to $70 per barrel, much higher than the oil sands heavy crude. And there has been a considerable discussion in the last year that Permian Basin producers have run out of their best fields and will be forced to extract from lower quality reservoirs, which will increase their costs. There's another important difference between the oil sands and U.S. shale production. The oil sands is considered a long cycle investment that pays out over 15 to 30 years. Shale production is short cycle, with wells gushing for the first 2 years, then rapidly declining, which means new wells must be drilled, meaning a new round of capital expenditures. Alberta oil sands producers have argued for a long time that low operating costs and a resource with very low decline rates gives them a competitive advantage over shale producers who have to keep raising large amounts of capital to drill new wells to replace depleted ones. Now let's talk about markets for ultra-heavy sour crude versus light sweet crude. It's critical to understand that the two are not interchangeable in a refinery. Plants set up with cokers for heavy crude cannot easily switch to light crude. In fact, most times it's downright impossible. And even if they could switch, North American pipelines mostly run north to south. So there'd be no way to get light sweet crude from Texas to refineries in the Midwest or Rocky Mountain regions. So let's back up for a moment and think about the global market for heavy sour crude. There's currently 10 million barrels per day of refining capacity for this type of oil. 5.5 million barrels per day of that capacity is located in the United States, mostly in the Midwest and the U.S. Gulf Coast. Canada supplies about 3.5 million barrels per day of heavy sour crude, around 64% of the total. That makes Canada the biggest player by far in U.S. crude oil imports. What makes it even more interesting is that Mexico says it plans to remove 600,000 barrels per day of Mayan heavy crude from the U.S. market. And the Trump administration revoked Venezuela's license to export oil to the U.S., which could take another 200,000 barrels a day of supply from American refineries. The North American heavy crude market is tight right now and could become much tighter in the very near future, which bodes well for the oil sands. And if that argument for the competitiveness of Canadian heavy crude isn't enough, here are three additional wrinkles to consider. One, U.S. refineries processing cheap Canadian heavy crude enables light sweet crude producers in Texas to export 4 million barrels per day to Europe, where the premium product fetches a much higher price. As of today, Brent is selling for $61 a barrel, West Texas Intermediate for $58, and Western Canadian Select for under $47. Canadians might ask President Trump just who is ripping off who in this arrangement. Two, building pipelines in Canada takes years, at least 5, even if governments work to streamline approvals. But there currently exists 650,000 barrels a day of new shipping capacity that can be added in existing pipelines to the United States by using friction-reducing agents. And there are also partial upgrading technologies that could reduce the amount of diluent needed to ship bitumen, which would free up even more space in existing pipelines. 3. Currently, between 150,000 and 200,000 barrels per day of Canadian heavy crude are re-exported from the U.S. Gulf Coast to foreign markets. Is there opportunity to increase this volume? Perhaps we should inquire before spending tens of billions of dollars on new pipelines. So, to sum up, Alberta heavy crude is inexpensive to produce, serves a large captured American market with still more room to expand, and can grow U.S. exports without building a single kilometer of new pipeline. The evidence shows clearly that the rumors of the Canadian oil sands death are greatly exaggerated.